The snow fell silently against the restaurant windows, each flake catching the amber glow of the street lamps outside. Emma Martinez pressed her forehead against the cold glass for just a moment, watching the white blanket slowly covering Fifth Avenue. Christmas Eve in New York City. The most magical night of the year, they said. For most people, anyway. She pulled back from the window and returned to wiping down the tables, the damp cloth moving in methodical circles across the dark wood surfaces, the scent of cleaning solution mixed with the lingering aroma of garlic, tomato sauce, and fresh basil that had filled Rossini's Italian restaurant just hours ago. Now at nearly 10 o'clock the place stood completely empty. The last customers had left around 8:30, families rushing home to wrap presents and prepare for tomorrow's celebrations. Emma was 23 years old, though some days she felt much older. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame her tired face. She wore the standard black pants and white button-down shirt required of the restaurant staff, though the apron she'd worn during service now hung on a hook near the kitchen door. Her brown eyes, usually bright and observant, carried a certain heaviness tonight, the weight of another holiday spent alone. "Emma, honey, you can head out if you want," Mr. Rossini had said earlier, his round face sympathetic as he buttoned his heavy coat. The 60-year-old owner had run this restaurant for 30 years and he'd always been kind to her. "Your shift ended at 9. Don't worry about the last few tables." "It's okay, Mr. Rossini," Emma had replied with a small smile. "I don't have anywhere to be. Might as well finish properly." The truth behind those words stung more than she wanted to admit. She literally had nowhere to be. No family gathering awaited her. No friends had invited her to their celebrations. Her tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn would be just as empty as this restaurant, only colder and more depressing. At least here, surrounded by the remnants of other people's joy, she could pretend she was part of something. Mr. Rossini had hesitated, clearly wanting to insist she leave, but Emma had already turned back to her work. She heard him sigh, heard the jingle of keys, and then the heavy door closing behind him. The lock clicked into place. She was alone now, truly alone, with just the hum of the refrigerators in the kitchen and the soft jazz music still playing from the speakers above. Emma moved from table to table, her movements automatic after 6 months of working here. She'd been hired in June, just another struggling young woman trying to make it in the city that never sleeps. The job wasn't glamorous, waiting tables, cleaning up, dealing with difficult customers, but it paid her rent and kept food in her stomach. That was more than she'd had in some periods of her life. The memories crept in uninvited, as they often did during quiet moments. Emma had grown up in the foster care system, bouncing from home to home throughout her childhood. Some families had been kind, others had viewed foster children as little more than a source of extra income. She'd never been adopted, never found that permanent place where she truly belonged. At 18, she'd aged out of the system and found herself completely on her own. College had been a dream she'd chased for 2 years, working multiple jobs and taking classes at a community college. But when her hours got cut at one job and her roommate suddenly moved out, leaving her with double the rent, Emma had been forced to drop out. She'd moved to New York 2 years ago with $500 and a backpack full of everything she owned, convinced that somehow in this massive city she'd find her place. She hadn't found it yet. Emma paused at the window again, watching a family walk past outside. A mother and father held the hands of a small child between them, swinging the laughing girl between them as they walked. The child wore a red coat with white fur trim, and her joy was visible even through the glass and falling snow. Emma felt something twist in her chest. Not quite jealousy, but a deep, aching loneliness that had been her constant companion for as long as she could remember. She turned away quickly, blinking back the tears that threatened to form. Crying wouldn't change anything. It never had. The next table needed attention, and Emma focused on that, on the simple concrete task in front of her. Wipe the surface, check for crumbs, straighten the salt and pepper shakers, make sure everything looked perfect for tomorrow's customers. Tomorrow the restaurant would be closed, but they'd reopen the day after Christmas, and Mr. Rossini insisted everything should be spotless. Tomorrow Emma would spend the day alone in her apartment, probably watching old movies and pretending she didn't notice it was a holiday. She'd done it before. Thanksgiving had been the same. She'd bought herself a small turkey sandwich from the deli downstairs and watched the parade on her small television. It was fine. She was used to it. The jazz music shifted to a new song, something slower and more melancholy. Emma recognized it. Billie Holiday, singing about dreams and heartache. How appropriate. She'd finished about half the tables when she heard something that made her freeze. The sound of the front door opening. Emma's head snapped toward the entrance, her heart suddenly pounding. Mr. Rossini had locked that door. She'd heard it. Had someone broken in? Her mind immediately went to worst-case scenarios, robberies, attacks, all the dangers that came with being a young woman alone in an empty building late at night. But the figure that stepped through the door wasn't what she expected. It was a child. A little girl, no more than 6 or 7 years old, stood in the doorway. She wore an expensive-looking navy blue coat with gold buttons, and her dark hair fell in perfect curls around her shoulders. Her eyes were a striking hazel green, and they surveyed the empty restaurant with open curiosity, rather than fear. Behind her, partially obscured by the falling snow, Emma could see a large figure, a man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit despite the cold. He remained outside, watching, but making no move to follow the child in. "Hello?" Emma called out, her voice uncertain. She set down her cleaning cloth and moved toward the front of the restaurant. "I'm sorry, but we're closed. How did you—" "The door was open," the little girl said matter-of-factly. Her voice carried a slight accent, something that suggested Italian heritage, matching the elegant way she carried herself. "I saw the lights on. Are you working?" Emma glanced at the door, confused. She was certain Mr. Rossini had locked it. Maybe he'd forgotten, or maybe this child was lying. But why would a child lie about something like that? "Yes, I'm just finishing cleaning," Emma replied, trying to sound friendly despite her confusion and slight alarm. "But we're not serving food right now. Are you lost? Is that your father outside?" The girl glanced back at the man waiting in the snow, then returned her attention to Emma. "That's Giovanni. He works for my father. We were driving past and I saw you in here. You're all alone." There was something in the way she said it, "You're all alone," that made Emma's throat tighten. It wasn't accusatory or pitying. It was simply an observation, delivered with the straightforward honesty that only children possess. "I'm finishing my work," Emma said, offering a small smile. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sophia." The girl took a few steps further into the restaurant, her expensive leather shoes clicking softly on the tile floor. "Sophia Valentino. What's your name?" "I'm Emma. Emma Martinez." She watched as Sophia moved between the tables, running her small hand along the backs of chairs as she went. "It's very late for a little girl to be out. Shouldn't you be home? It's Christmas Eve." "I know what day it is," Sophia replied, stopping at one of the tables Emma had just cleaned. She looked up at Emma with those unnervingly perceptive eyes. "We were coming back from visiting my grandmother. She lives in Connecticut. My papa always takes me to see her on Christmas Eve." Emma nodded slowly. The child seemed perfectly safe, perfectly comfortable, but there was something unusual about this situation. The expensive clothes, the bodyguard waiting outside, the casual way Sophia spoke about her father and grandmother. It all suggested wealth and privilege beyond anything Emma had ever known. "That sounds nice," Emma said gently. "Your grandmother must love having you visit." Sophia's expression shifted slightly, a shadow passing across her young face. "She talks about my mama a lot. My mama died when I was 4. I don't remember her very much, but Nonna, that's my grandmother. She tells me stories." The words hit Emma harder than she expected. This beautiful little girl, dressed like a princess, standing in an empty restaurant on Christmas Eve, talking about her dead mother with the kind of matter-of-fact sadness that suggested she'd learned to live with the grief. "I'm so sorry, Sophia," Emma said softly, kneeling down so she was at eye level with the child. "That must be very hard." Sophia shrugged, a gesture too adult for her small frame. "Papa says Mama is watching over us. I like to think that's true." She paused, studying Emma's face with unsettling intensity. "Are your parents watching over you too?" The question, delivered with such innocent directness, made Emma's carefully constructed walls crack just a little. I never really knew my parents," she admitted. "I grew up in foster care, different families, different houses." "So you're alone," Sophia said again, and this time there was definitely sympathy in her voice. "Like me, except I have Papa and Nonna and lots of people at our house. But sometimes I still feel alone, especially without Mama." Emma felt tears prickling at her eyes again, but she blinked them away. "I think everyone feels alone sometimes, even when they're surrounded by people." They stood there in silence for a moment, this unlikely pair, a lonely waitress and a wealthy child, connected by the strange emptiness that can exist even in the fullest of lives. "Why are you working on Christmas Eve?" Sophia asked suddenly. "Don't you have somewhere to be?" It was the same question Emma had been avoiding asking herself all day. "No," she said simply. I don't have family to celebrate with, so I figured I might as well work. At least here I'm doing something useful. Sophia's eyes widened slightly, and Emma could see the wheels turning in the child's mind. You're going to be alone tonight? On Christmas Eve? And tomorrow too? It's okay, Emma said quickly, standing back up. I'm used to it. Really, I'll be fine. But Sophia was already shaking her head, her curls bouncing with the movement. She turned and ran toward the door, pushing it open and calling out to the man waiting outside. Giovanni, come here, I need to talk to Papa. Emma watched in confusion as Sophia disappeared into the snow, heard muffled voices, and then saw a new figure emerge from a black luxury car that had been idling at the curb. Even from a distance, even through the falling snow, Emma could sense the power and authority of the man who stepped onto the sidewalk. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his expensive black wool coat. His dark hair was styled perfectly, barely disturbed by the snow, and even from here, Emma could see the sharp angles of his face, the strong jaw, the kind of commanding presence that made people stop and pay attention. This had to be Sophia's father. He leaned down as Sophia spoke animatedly to him, her small hands gesturing toward the restaurant, toward Emma. The man listened, his expression unreadable, then nodded once. He straightened up and began walking toward the restaurant entrance, his stride confident and purposeful. Emma's heart began to race. She smoothed down her shirt self-consciously, suddenly very aware of how she must look, tired, disheveled, clearly exhausted from a long day of work. This man, whoever he was, radiated wealth and power, the kind of person who probably never even noticed people like her. The door opened, and he stepped inside, Sophia bouncing in behind him. Giovanni, the bodyguard, remained outside, a silent sentinel in the snow. Up close, Sophia's father was even more imposing. He appeared to be in his late 30s, with dark eyes that seemed to assess everything in a single glance. His features were distinctly Italian: strong nose, full lips, olive skin that suggested Mediterranean heritage. He wore a perfectly tailored suit under his coat, and a watch that probably cost more than Emma made in a year glinted on his wrist. But what struck Emma most was the way his expression softened when he looked down at his daughter. The intimidating authority melted away, replaced by genuine affection and patience. Papa, this is Emma, Sophia announced, tugging on her father's hand. She's all alone on Christmas Eve. She doesn't have any family. She's going to spend tomorrow by herself. Emma felt her face flush with embarrassment. Sophia, you don't have to. Is this true? The man's voice was deep and smooth, with just a trace of an Italian accent. His eyes fixed on Emma, and she felt pinned under that gaze like he could see through all her defenses to the lonely truth beneath. Yes, but it's fine, Emma stammered. I'm used to it. Your daughter is very kind to be concerned, but really, I'll be okay. He studied her for a long moment, and Emma couldn't read what he was thinking. Then Sophia tugged on his hand again. Papa, we should invite her to our house for Christmas. She shouldn't be alone. Emma's eyes widened. Oh no, that's really not necessary. I couldn't possibly. Sophia, her father said gently, we can't just invite strangers into our home. But Sophia was undeterred, her young face set with determination. You always say that Christmas is about family and kindness. That's what Mama would have wanted. Emma is nice, I can tell, and she's all alone, Papa. On Christmas, the man looked down at his daughter, something complicated passing across his features. Emma could see the internal struggle, the desire to protect his child versus the desire to honor her compassionate heart. Then he looked back at Emma, and their eyes met. In that moment, Emma saw something she hadn't expected: recognition, not of her specifically, but of loneliness, of loss, of the weight that comes from carrying grief. This man, for all his wealth and power, understood what it meant to be alone. My name is Marco Valentino, he said formally, extending his hand. Sophia is right. We shouldn't let you spend Christmas alone if you have nowhere else to be. Emma hesitated, staring at his outstretched hand. This was insane. You didn't just go home with complete strangers, especially wealthy strangers with bodyguards and luxury cars. Every practical instinct she had was screaming at her to politely decline, to finish her work, to go back to her small apartment where at least she knew what to expect. But then she looked at Sophia, whose eyes were bright with hope and something like pleading, and she thought about tomorrow, waking up in her cold apartment, the silence, the endless empty hours stretching ahead of her. I don't want to intrude, Emma said quietly. You don't even know me. Papa, Sophia said insistently. Please. Marco Valentino looked at his daughter, then back at Emma. Our home is in the Hamptons, about 2 hours from here. We have more than enough space, and Sophia would be delighted to have company. I promise you, Miss Martinez, you would be a welcome guest. There was sincerity in his voice beneath the formal politeness, and something else, perhaps a recognition that sometimes the most important kindnesses are the ones extended to strangers. Emma swallowed hard, her mind racing. This was crazy. This was potentially dangerous. She knew nothing about these people except that they were clearly very wealthy and very something. There was an edge to Marco Valentino, something beneath the polished exterior that suggested he wasn't just any businessman. But Sophia was looking at her with such hope, and Emma was so tired of being alone. I would need to tell my landlord, she heard herself saying. And I'd need to get some things for my apartment. Sophia's face lit up like a Christmas tree, and even Marco's serious expression softened into something that might have been approval. Of course, he said. We can arrange that. Giovanni can drive you to collect whatever you need. 20 minutes later, Emma found herself in the back seat of the most luxurious car she'd ever seen, watching the snow-covered streets of Manhattan slide past the window. Sophia sat beside her, chattering excitedly about their house, about Christmas traditions, about everything and nothing. Marco sat in the front passenger seat, occasionally glancing back at them in the rearview mirror. Giovanni drove in silence, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings with professional vigilance. Emma had grabbed a small bag of clothes from her apartment, left a note for her landlord, and locked the door on her lonely little life, at least for tonight, at least for Christmas. She had no idea what awaited her at the Valentino estate, no idea who these people really were, no idea if she was making the best decision of her life or the most foolish one. But as Sophia reached over and squeezed her hand, as the warm car carried her away from the cold, empty night, Emma decided that maybe, just maybe, some risks were worth taking. After all, what did she have to lose? The city lights began to fade as they headed toward the highway, and Emma watched them disappear, feeling like she was leaving behind one version of her life and driving toward something completely unknown. Are you scared? Sophia asked suddenly, her intuitive eyes watching Emma's face. Emma considered lying, but something about this child demanded honesty. A little, she admitted. Sophia nodded wisely. That's okay. Sometimes the best things are a little bit scary at first. Papa says being brave means doing things even when you're afraid. From the front seat, Emma saw Marco's shoulders tense slightly at his daughter's words, as if he were reminded of lessons he'd taught her about courage and fear. The snow continued to fall as they drove through the night, leaving the city behind, heading toward a future Emma couldn't have imagined just hours ago. She thought about the empty restaurant, about the tables she'd been cleaning, about how just one small girl saying, "You're all alone," had changed the entire trajectory of her Christmas, and maybe her life. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the warmth of the car, hearing Sophia's happy chatter, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Emma allowed herself to feel something like hope. Whatever came next, at least she wouldn't be alone tonight. The drive seemed to stretch on forever, though Emma knew from the dashboard clock that barely 90 minutes had passed. Sophia had finally fallen asleep about halfway through the journey, her head resting against Emma's shoulder, her breathing soft and steady. Emma hadn't moved, afraid to wake the child, acutely aware of the trust this little girl had placed in her, a complete stranger. Through the window, Emma watched as the urban landscape gradually gave way to suburbs, then to darker stretches of highway bordered by snow-covered trees. The further they drove from the city, the more surreal this entire situation felt. What was she doing? Getting into a car with people she didn't know, driving to some mansion in the Hamptons, all because a 6-year-old had invited her? Yet here she was. We're almost there, Marco said from the front seat, his voice low to avoid waking Sophia. It was the first thing he'd said in nearly an hour. The estate is just beyond this next turn. Emma nodded, then realized he probably couldn't see her in the darkness. Okay, she whispered back. Giovanni turned off the main road onto a smaller lane, barely visible through the falling snow. The trees grew denser here, their branches heavy with white. Then, emerging from the darkness, Emma saw them. Massive iron gates, at least 12 feet tall, with elaborate scrollwork and the letter V worked into the design. A security booth stood to the left of the gates, and a man in a dark uniform stepped out as they approached. Giovanni rolled down his window and the guard leaned in, his eyes scanning the interior of the car before nodding. He pressed something, and the gates began to swing open with barely a sound. Emma's heart began to beat faster. Those gates, that security. This wasn't just wealth. This was something else entirely. The driveway stretched ahead of them, lined with lamp posts that cast golden pools of light on the pristine white snow. Emma could see manicured grounds even beneath the winter covering, and in the distance, lights began to appear. Many lights. Then the house came into view, and Emma's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a house. It was an estate, a massive 3-story structure of pale stone and large windows, with a circular driveway that curved around an elaborate fountain. The architecture was classical Italian, with arched windows, wrought iron balconies, and what looked like statuary positioned along the roofline. Warm light poured from nearly every window, making the building glow against the snowy night like something from a fairy tale. "Oh my God," Emma whispered, unable to stop herself. Sophia stirred at the sound of her voice, blinking sleepily. "We're home," she murmured, lifting her head from Emma's shoulder. "Do you like it?" It's beautiful," Emma managed, which felt like a massive understatement. The place looked like it belonged in a magazine spread about European estates not tucked away in the Hamptons. Giovanni pulled the car to a stop in front of the main entrance, where wide stone steps led up to massive wooden doors. Before Emma could fully process what was happening, those doors opened and several people emerged. Staff, Emma realized, dressed in formal attire, ready to assist with their arrival. Marco stepped out of the car first, then opened the back door for Sophia. The little girl climbed out eagerly, then turned back to look at Emma with an encouraging smile. "Come on, don't be nervous." Easy for her to say. This was her home. For Emma, this felt like stepping into a completely different world, one where she definitely didn't belong. But she took a deep breath and slid across the seat, accepting Marco's offered hand as she stepped out into the cold night air. His grip was firm and steady, and when their eyes met briefly, Emma thought she saw understanding there, perhaps an awareness of how overwhelming this must be for her. "Welcome to our home, Miss Martinez," he said formally, though his tone was warmer than it had been in the restaurant. A woman in her 50s appeared at the top of the steps, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She wore a simple but expensive-looking black dress, and her bearing suggested she ran this household with efficient precision. "Mrs. Chen, this is Miss Emma Martinez," Marco said as they climbed the steps. "She'll be our guest for the holidays. Please prepare the blue guest suite for her." Mrs. Chen's expression remained professionally neutral, though Emma caught the briefest flicker of surprise in her eyes. "Of course, Mr. Valentino. Welcome, Miss Martinez. I'm the head housekeeper. If you need anything at all during your stay, please don't hesitate to ask." "Thank you," Emma said softly, feeling completely out of her depth. They stepped through the entrance into a foyer that took Emma's breath away all over again. The floor was polished marble, with an intricate inlaid pattern. A grand staircase swept upward, its railings gleaming dark wood with ornate metalwork. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting prismatic light across everything. Fresh flowers, white lilies and red roses, stood in arrangements on antique tables flanking the entrance. This wasn't just wealth. This was generational wealth, old money, the kind of affluence Emma had only ever seen in movies. "Sophia, it's past your bedtime," Marco said gently, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Mrs. Chen will help you get ready for bed." "But Papa, I want to show Emma around," Sophia protested, though Emma could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "Tomorrow," Marco promised. "Miss Martinez isn't going anywhere. She'll be here in the morning and you can show her everything then." Sophia turned to Emma, her expression worried. "You promise you'll still be here tomorrow?" The question broke Emma's heart a little. This child who had everything money could buy was still afraid of people leaving. "I promise," Emma said, meaning it. "I'll be right here when you wake up." Satisfied, Sophia allowed Mrs. Chen to lead her toward the stairs, but she turned back twice to wave at Emma, as if needing to confirm she was still there. Once Sophia had disappeared upstairs, the atmosphere in the foyer shifted. Marco turned his full attention to Emma, and she felt the weight of his scrutiny. In the better light she could see more details, the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and sleepless nights, the careful way he held himself, as if constantly aware of being watched and judged. "I imagine you have questions," he said simply. Emma almost laughed. "About 1,000 of them." A slight smile touched his lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Come, let's talk in my study. Mrs. Chen will have someone bring your bag to your room." He led her through the house and Emma tried not to gape at everything they passed. Paintings that looked like they belonged in museums. Furniture that was clearly antique and probably priceless. Rooms that seemed to go on forever, each more elegantly appointed than the last. The study was toward the back of the house, a wood-paneled room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk. A fire crackled in the fireplace and comfortable leather chairs faced the warmth. Marco gestured for Emma to sit, then moved to a small bar cart. "Would you like something to drink? Wine? Coffee?" he asked. "Coffee would be great, actually," Emma admitted. "I don't think I could sleep right now if I tried." He smiled again, slightly wider this time. "I understand the feeling." He pressed a button on the wall, and moments later, a young man in staff uniform appeared. Marco requested coffee, then settled into the chair across from Emma, the firelight playing across his features. "I should explain who we are," he began, "and what you've walked into." Emma's stomach tightened. "Okay. My family has been in America for 3 generations, Marco said carefully. "My grandfather came from Sicily in the 1950s. He built a successful import-export business. Legitimate, legal, profitable. My father expanded it, and I've continued that expansion. We deal primarily in Italian goods, wines, olive oils, specialty foods, textiles." He paused as the staff member returned with a tray bearing coffee and delicate pastries. Once they were alone again, Marco continued, "However, my family also has connections, business relationships that go beyond simple commerce. We are what you might call a traditional Italian family, with all that implies." Emma's mouth went dry. He was basically admitting they were connected to organized crime, though not in those exact words. The bodyguard, the security, the massive estate, it all made horrible sense now. "I'm telling you this because you're in my home, around my daughter, and you deserve to know the truth," Marco said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I run legitimate businesses. I don't involve myself in anything illegal, but I can't control what my father did, or my grandfather, or what certain relatives choose to do. The name Valentino carries weight, and not all of it is about wine and olive oil." "Why are you telling me this?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm nobody, just a waitress you met a few hours ago." "Because Sophia has already bonded with you," Marco replied, "and because I saw something in you tonight, something that made me trust my daughter's instincts. She's rarely wrong about people." The coffee sat untouched between them as Emma tried to process everything. She should be terrified. She should make an excuse and call a cab back to the city. But instead, she found herself asking, what happened to Sophia's mother? Pain flashed across Marco's face, quickly controlled but unmistakable. "Isabella died 2 years ago. Cancer. She was sick for a long time, but she fought hard, tried every treatment. In the end, nothing worked." "I'm so sorry," Emma said softly, and she meant it. "Sophia was only 4 when we lost her," Marco continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She doesn't remember much, just impressions, feelings. Sometimes I think that makes it harder. She knows she had a mother, knows she should miss her, but the actual memories are fading. That's why she feels alone," Emma said, understanding clicking into place. "Even surrounded by all these people, by you, by everything, she's missing that one person." Marco nodded, looking into the fire. "I try to be enough for her. I try to be both parents. But there are things a father can't provide no matter how hard he tries." They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling, the weight of shared grief and loneliness filling the space between them. "Why did you really invite me here?" Emma asked. "It's not just because Sophia asked, is it?" Marco looked at her, really looked at her, and Emma saw the loneliness in his eyes, the same loneliness she'd carried for so long. "Because when Sophia said you were alone on Christmas Eve, I saw your face. I recognized that look, and I thought, perhaps we could all use some company. Perhaps healing comes from unexpected places." The honesty in his words took Emma's breath away. This powerful man in his fortress of a house with all his money and connections was essentially admitting he was lonely too. "I don't understand your world," Emma said honestly. "I don't know anything about this kind of life. I grew up with nothing, moved from place to place, never knowing where I belonged. This," she gestured around them, "this is so far beyond anything I've ever experienced." "Good," Marco said simply. "Sophia doesn't need someone who understands my world. She needs someone genuine, someone kind, someone who sees her as a child and not as the Valentino heir. When she met you, she saw a person who knew what it meant to be alone. She connected with that. Emma took a sip of her coffee, buying time to think. What exactly are you asking me? Stay, Marco said. Not just for Christmas. Stay as Sophia's companion, her tutor if you will. She's homeschooled. We have a teacher who comes 3 times a week. But that's not enough. She needs someone present, someone who can be there for her day to day. Someone who isn't staff, who doesn't see her as a job. You're offering me a position? Emma asked, stunned. I'm offering you a home, Marco corrected. Room, board, and a salary. No set hours because this isn't about punching a clock. It's about being there for a little girl who has already decided you're important. It was insane. It was dangerous. Emma knew she should refuse, should run back to her small safe life where at least she knew the rules. But that life had been so empty, so lonely. And here was an opportunity, not just for a job, not just for money, but for something that might actually matter. Can I think about it? She asked. At least through Christmas? See how things go? Marco nodded. Of course. Stay through the holidays. Get to know Sophia, get to know the house, and then decide. No pressure, no obligation. If you choose to leave, I'll make sure you're compensated for your time and that you get back to the city safely. A knock on the door interrupted them. Mrs. Chen appeared, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Valentino, but Miss Martinez's room is ready. I thought she might want to rest. It's been a long evening. Emma suddenly felt the exhaustion hit her like a wave. Between her shift at the restaurant, the emotional upheaval, and the long drive, she could barely keep her eyes open. Thank you, Mrs. Chen, Marco said, standing. Emma rose as well, slightly unsteady. Miss Martinez, I hope you sleep well. Sophia will undoubtedly be knocking on your door at an ungodly hour, eager to start the day. Emma managed a tired smile. I'll be ready for her. Mrs. Chen led Emma back through the house and up the grand staircase. The second floor was just as impressive as the first, with wide hallways lined with artwork and plush carpeting that muffled their footsteps. This is the blue suite, Mrs. Chen said, opening a door near the end of the hall. Sophia's room is 3 doors down, and Mr. Valentino's private quarters are on the 3rd floor. If you need anything, there's a phone on the nightstand that connects directly to the staff quarters. Simply pick it up and someone will assist you. Emma stepped into the room and had to suppress a gasp. It was larger than her entire apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in blue and white linens. French doors led to what appeared to be a private balcony. There was a sitting area with a sofa and chairs, a writing desk, and through an open door Emma could see a marble bathroom that looked like something from a spa. Her small duffel bag sat on a bench at the foot of the bed, looking completely out of place in the elegant surroundings. Your private bathroom has everything you should need, Mrs. Chen continued. Fresh towels, toiletries, robes. If you require anything else, please don't hesitate to call. Breakfast is typically served at 8, but given the late hour, you're welcome to sleep in. Just call when you wake and we'll bring something to your room, or you can come down to the dining room. Thank you, Emma managed. It's beautiful. Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. Mr. Valentino is a good man, Miss Martinez. He loves his daughter very much. Whatever brought you here tonight, I hope you'll give it a fair chance. Sophia hasn't been this excited about anything in a very long time. With that cryptic statement, the housekeeper left, closing the door quietly behind her. Alone in the enormous room, Emma walked slowly to the window. She pulled back the heavy curtains and looked out at the snow-covered grounds. Lights illuminated the paths and gardens, showing off the careful landscaping even in winter. In the distance, she could see what looked like a pool house and tennis courts. This was impossible. This couldn't be her life, even temporarily. Yet here she was. Emma found her phone in her bag and saw several missed calls from Mr. Rossini, probably worried about her leaving the restaurant. She sent him a quick text explaining that she was safe, that she'd met some people who'd invited her to spend the holidays with them, and that she'd be back after Christmas to discuss her schedule. His response came immediately. Emma, I'm just glad you're not alone tonight. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Be safe. Tears pricked at Emma's eyes. Mr. Rossini had always been kind, but this simple message of care and concern touched something deep in her heart. She got ready for bed in the luxurious bathroom, feeling like an imposter using the expensive soaps and soft towels. The pajamas she'd packed, old cotton pants and a faded t-shirt, looked ridiculous in this setting, but they were comfortable, and they were hers. And right now, she needed that connection to her real life. The bed was incredibly comfortable, the mattress perfectly firm, the pillows soft as clouds. Emma turned off the lights and lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear pipes creaking. The wind whistled softly against the windows, and underneath it all the profound silence that came with being far from the city. She thought about Marco's offer. A job, a home, a purpose beyond just surviving day to day, the chance to make a difference in a child's life, but also danger, or at least the proximity to danger. The Valentino name carried weight, Marco had said. That meant enemies, probably. It meant complications, secrets, a world where everything wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Emma rolled onto her side, pulling the covers up to her chin. Tomorrow she would think about it more clearly. Tomorrow she would spend time with Sophia, explore this strange new world and try to figure out if this impossible opportunity was a gift or a mistake. But tonight, for the first time in as long as she could remember, Emma fell asleep knowing that when she woke up she wouldn't be alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth the risk. 2 weeks had passed since that snowy Christmas Eve, and Emma's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. She'd woken up that first morning to Sophia bursting into her room at 7:30, pajamas still on, eyes bright with excitement about showing Emma everything, and Sophia had meant everything. The estate was even more impressive in daylight. The grounds stretched over 15 acres with manicured gardens currently sleeping under snow, a heated pool enclosed in glass, tennis courts, and even a small greenhouse where Mrs. Chen grew fresh herbs year-round. Inside, the house had 23 rooms, each more elegant than the last. But what struck Emma most wasn't the wealth. It was the warmth that Sophia brought to these grand spaces. The little girl had claimed Emma immediately, dragging her from room to room, chattering about memories, about her favorite hiding spots, about where her mother used to sit and read. Now, on a gray January morning, Emma sat at the kitchen table helping Sophia with mathematics, while Mrs. Chen prepared lunch nearby. The kitchen was enormous but surprisingly cozy, with copper pots hanging from the ceiling and a large window overlooking the snow-covered rose garden. If Maria has 12 cookies and gives 3 to her brother, how many does she have left? Emma read from the workbook. Sophia scrunched up her face in concentration, counting on her fingers. 9. Perfect, Emma praised, and Sophia beamed with pride. The formal tutor, Miss Peterson, came 3 afternoons a week to cover the core curriculum, but Emma had discovered she enjoyed teaching Sophia during their time together. The girl was bright and curious, asking endless questions about everything from why snow was white to whether the stars had names. Emma? Sophia asked suddenly, setting down her pencil. Are you happy here? The question caught Emma off guard. What makes you ask that, sweetheart? Sometimes you get a sad look on your face, Sophia observed with that unnerving perceptiveness, like you're thinking about something that makes you miss being somewhere else. Emma reached over and tucked a curl behind Sophia's ear. I am happy here, happier than I've been in a long time. Sometimes I just can't believe this is real, that I get to spend my days with you. It was the truth. These 2 weeks had been the most content Emma had felt since she could remember. She had purpose here. She had Sophia's laughter and constant companionship, and she had Marco's quiet presence, always respectful, always kind, but increasingly more present in her daily life. He joined them for breakfast most mornings, listening to Sophia's excited plans for the day. He returned in the evenings in time for dinner, during which Sophia would recount everything they'd done, and sometimes after Sophia went to bed, he and Emma would find themselves talking in the library or the study, conversations that stretched late into the night about books, about life, about loss and healing. Emma had felt something shifting between them, something neither acknowledged but both seemed aware of, a connection, a pull, an understanding that went beyond employer and employee. Can we build a snowman after lunch? Sophia asked, already moving past her moment of worry. A really big one? Absolutely, Emma agreed. We'll make the biggest snowman this estate has ever seen. Mrs. Chen smiled from where she stood preparing sandwiches. The housekeeper had warmed to Emma over the past 2 weeks, seeing how genuinely Sophia had attached to her. The rest of the staff had followed suit, accepting Emma's presence with varying degrees of friendliness. Only Giovanni, the bodyguard, remained somewhat distant, always professional, always watching but never quite relaxed around her. Emma understood why. His job was to protect the Valentino family, and she was still an unknown quantity. After lunch, Emma bundled Sophia into her coat, hat, and mittens, and they ventured into the cold afternoon. The snow was perfect for packing, and they worked together rolling massive snowballs across the lawn. They were halfway through constructing their snowman when Emma heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. She looked up to see a black SUV pulling up to the house, not one of the Valentino vehicles. Two men got out, both wearing expensive suits and carrying themselves with the kind of confidence that suggested they were accustomed to getting their way. Giovanni appeared immediately from somewhere, positioning himself between the men and where Emma stood with Sophia. Two other security personnel Emma had seen around the estate materialized as well, flanking Giovanni. "Sophia, let's go inside," Emma said quickly, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. But Sophia had frozen, staring at the men. "That's Mr. Caruso," she whispered. "Papa doesn't like him." Before Emma could react, Marco emerged from the house, his expression hard and controlled. He said something to Giovanni, then walked down the steps to meet the visitors. The conversation was too far away for Emma to hear, but body language spoke volumes. Marco stood rigid. The other men gestured emphatically, voices rising slightly. "Come on, sweetheart," Emma urged gently, taking Sophia's hand. "Let's go get hot chocolate." This time Sophia allowed herself to be led inside, but she kept looking back at her father, worry creasing her small face. Emma brought her to the kitchen, where Mrs. Chen immediately understood the situation and busied herself making elaborate hot chocolate with whipped cream and marshmallows. Emma stood by the window, watching the scene outside. The conversation looked tense, occasionally heated, but remained civil. After about 10 minutes, the visitors returned to their SUV and drove away. Marco stood watching them go, his shoulders tight with tension, before turning back toward the house. He came into the kitchen, and Sophia immediately ran to him. "Papa, are you okay?" Marco softened instantly, lifting his daughter into his arms. "I'm fine, Piccola. Just some boring business discussion. Nothing for you to worry about." But his eyes found Emma's over Sophia's head, and she saw the strain there, the carefully controlled anger. Whatever that meeting had been about, it hadn't been boring or routine. That evening, after Sophia had been tucked into bed, Marco found Emma in the library. She'd been reading or trying to read, unable to shake the unsettled feeling from that afternoon. "I owe you an explanation," he said without preamble, closing the door behind him. Emma set down her book. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do." He moved to pour himself a drink from the bar cart, then seemed to think better of it and sat down across from her instead. "What you saw today? That was the Caruso family. They're business associates. Or they were." "Were?" Emma prompted when he fell silent. "There's a territorial dispute," Marco said carefully. "Nothing violent, nothing illegal, but a disagreement about business operations in certain areas of the city. The Carusos believe they have claim to certain opportunities. I disagree." "And they came here to your home to discuss this?" Emma asked, remembering the tension, the barely concealed hostility. "They came here to intimidate," Marco corrected, his voice hardening. "To remind me that I have a daughter, that I have things to protect. It's an old tactic, showing up at someone's home, making them feel vulnerable." Emma felt cold despite the warmth of the library. "Are we in danger? Is Sophia?" "No," Marco said firmly. "I have extensive security. Giovanni and his team are highly trained, and the Carusos aren't violent. They're businessmen who occasionally forget the boundaries of professional discourse. But I won't lie to you, Emma. This is the reality of my world. There are always negotiations, always pressures, always people testing limits." Emma absorbed this, thinking about Sophia's innocent joy in building snowmen, about the peaceful rhythms of their days together. "Does this happen often?" "More than I'd like," Marco admitted. "Less than it used to when my father was alive and things were more complicated. I've worked hard to legitimize our operations to distance us from the less savory aspects of the family legacy. But the name still carries weight, and with it comes expectations and challenges." He looked at her directly, his dark eyes intense. "I told you that you could leave at any time. I meant it. If this is too much, if you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, I'll arrange for you to return to the city tomorrow. No hard feelings, no judgment." Emma thought about her tiny apartment, about going back to serving tables, about the loneliness that had been her constant companion. Then she thought about Sophia's laughter, about the way the little girl's face lit up every morning when Emma appeared for breakfast, about the sense of purpose she'd found here. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly but firmly. "Not unless Sophia wants me to go." Something flickered in Marco's expression. Relief, gratitude, and something else Emma couldn't quite name. "She would be devastated if you left. She talks about you constantly. You've become enormously important to her in a very short time. She's become important to me too, Emma admitted. I've never had family, never had anyone who needed me or wanted me around. Being here with Sophia, it's the first time I've felt like I belonged somewhere. You do belong here, Marco said softly. You've brought something back to this house that's been missing since Isabella died. Light, laughter, warmth. Sophia smiles more in one day with you than she did in entire weeks before you came. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The only sound, the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. What happened today won't happen again, Marco said. I've made it clear that my home is off limits. Any future discussions will take place in neutral territory, during business hours, away from Sophia and away from you. I'm not afraid, Emma found herself saying, surprising herself with the truth of it. I mean, maybe I should be, but I'm not. I trust you to keep us safe. Marco's eyes widened slightly at that simple declaration of trust. Thank you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. That means more than you know. Emma stood, suddenly aware of the lateness of the hour and the intimacy of the moment. I should get some sleep. Sophia wants to finish our snowman tomorrow and she'll be up early. Marco stood as well, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. Emma was acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the way his gaze seemed to trace her features, of the warmth radiating from him. Emma, he said softly, and her name on his lips sent a shiver through her. I'm glad you're staying. Me too, she whispered. The moment stretched, charged with possibility, before Emma forced herself to step back. This was her employer, Sophia's father, a man whose world she barely understood. Whatever she was feeling, attraction, connection, possibility, it was complicated by 1,000 factors. Good night, Marco, she said, deliberately using his first name for the first time. Good night, Emma, he replied, and the small smile on his face suggested he'd noticed the shift. Emma left the library, her heart racing, her mind spinning. She climbed the stairs to her room, passing Sophia's door and pausing to listen. Soft, even breathing confirmed the child was deep asleep. In her own room, Emma changed for bed and stood at the window, looking out at the moonlit snow. She could see their partially finished snowman, a testament to the simple joy of the afternoon before things had gotten complicated. But maybe complicated wasn't necessarily bad. Maybe complicated meant real, meant substantial, meant something worth navigating. Emma thought about the choice she'd just made, to stay, knowing the challenges, understanding the risks. She thought about Marco's barely concealed relief when she'd declared she wasn't leaving. She thought about the way something had shifted between them tonight, an acknowledgement of feelings neither was quite ready to voice. Most of all, she thought about Sophia, sleeping peacefully down the hall, trusting that Emma would still be there in the morning. And Emma would be. Whatever came next, business disputes, rival families, complicated feelings for Sophia's father, she would face it. Because for the first time in her life, Emma had found something worth fighting for, a place to belong, a child who needed her, and maybe, just maybe, something more. 3 weeks had passed since the Caruso family's unwelcome visit, and the tension in the household had been palpable. Emma had watched Marco become increasingly stressed, taking calls at odd hours, disappearing into his study for long meetings with men in expensive suits who arrived and departed with military precision. Giovanni's team had increased their presence around the estate. There were more security patrols, more cameras, more vigilance. Sophia had noticed, asking questions that Marco deflected with practiced ease, but Emma could see the worry in the little girl's eyes. It was late February now, the snow beginning to melt into muddy patches across the grounds. Emma stood in the greenhouse with Sophia, helping her plant seeds in small pots, a project Miss Peterson had assigned for science class. These will be tomatoes, Sophia said carefully, pressing a seed into the soil. And we can make sauce with them, like Nonna taught me. That sounds wonderful, Emma encouraged, though her mind was partly on Marco, who'd been locked in his study with 3 other men for the past 4 hours. Mrs. Chen appeared at the greenhouse door, her expression troubled. Miss Martinez, Mr. Valentino is asking for you, in his study. Emma's heart skipped. Marco never interrupted her time with Sophia unless it was important. Of course. Sophia, can you keep planting? I'll be right back. Is Papa okay? Sophia asked, dirt-smudged hands pausing their work. I'm sure he's fine, Emma assured her, though she wasn't sure at all. Keep working on your garden, sweetheart. Emma walked quickly toward the house, wiping her hands on her jeans. When she reached the study, Giovanni stood outside the door, his expression unreadable as always. He nodded and opened the door for her. Inside, Marco stood by the window looking out at the grounds. 3 other men sat in chairs facing his desk. Older men in their 50s and 60s with the kind of weathered faces that suggested they'd seen and survived a great deal. They all turned to look at Emma as she entered, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. "Emma, thank you for coming," Marco said, turning from the window. His face looked drawn, exhausted. "Please sit down." Emma took the empty chair near the door, suddenly very aware that she was wearing gardening clothes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, probably with dirt on her face. These men were all in tailored suits, and she felt completely out of place. "Gentlemen, this is Emma Martinez," Marco said formally. "She's Sophia's companion and has become an integral part of our household. Emma, these are my advisors, Mr. Benedetti, Mr. Russo, and Mr. DeLuca. They help me manage various aspects of the family business." The men nodded politely, though Emma could see them assessing her, wondering why she'd been called to what was clearly a serious business meeting. "The situation with the Caruso family has escalated," Marco said without preamble. "They've made it clear they won't back down from their territorial claims. They're pressuring our suppliers, undercutting our prices and spreading rumors designed to damage our reputation with our business partners." Emma listened, her stomach tightening. This sounded more serious than she'd realized. "We have options," Mr. Benedetti said, his voice gravelly with age. "We could apply counter-pressure, make things difficult for their operations. We have the resources and connections to do so. That would lead to escalation," Marco replied firmly. "Tit for tat, back and forth until someone makes a mistake and things turn genuinely hostile. I won't have that. Not with Sophia in this house, not anymore." "Then what do you propose?" Mr. Russo asked. "We can't simply concede. That would make us look weak. Invite more challenges from others." Marco was silent for a moment, his jaw tight with tension. "I'm considering a negotiated settlement, a compromise that gives them some of what they want while protecting our core interests." The 3 advisors exchanged glances. Mr. DeLuca spoke up, his tone cautious. "Marco, your father would never have compromised. Your grandfather certainly wouldn't have. The Valentino name stands for strength, for holding our ground." "My father is dead," Marco said bluntly. "My grandfather is dead, and I'm not interested in maintaining traditions that put my daughter at risk. Times change. Business evolves. We can be strong and still be willing to negotiate." "Some will see it as weakness," Mr. Benedetti warned. "Let them," Marco said. "I'd rather be seen as weak and have Sophia sleep safely than be seen as strong and live in constant fear of retaliation." Emma felt a surge of respect for Marco in that moment. He was willing to sacrifice his pride, his reputation for his daughter's safety. That took more courage than any aggressive posturing. "Why did you call me here?" Emma asked quietly. "I don't understand what this has to do with me." Marco looked at her and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Because over the next 48 hours I need to meet with the Caruso family to negotiate this settlement. It will require me to be away from the estate for extended periods, possibly overnight. I need to know that Sophia is safe, that she's with someone I trust completely." "Of course," Emma said immediately. "I'll stay with her every moment. You don't even need to ask." "There's more," Marco continued. "If negotiations fail, if things become hostile, there's a small possibility, very small but real, that someone might try to use Sophia or someone close to her as leverage. Giovanni will be with me during negotiations, but I'm leaving additional security here. I need you to follow their instructions without question if they tell you something is wrong." The seriousness of his tone sent a chill through Emma. This wasn't hypothetical anymore. This was real danger, real risk. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'll protect her, I promise." Marco crossed the room and knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. The gesture surprised her, and clearly surprised his advisors as well, based on the looks they exchanged. "Emma, if at any point you feel unsafe, if you want to take Sophia and leave with the security team to a safe location, you have my permission to do so. Your judgment, your instincts, I trust them completely." Emma looked into his eyes and saw the fear there, carefully controlled but unmistakable. He was terrified for his daughter, yet he was doing what he believed was necessary to keep her safe long term. "We'll be fine," Emma said firmly. "Go do what you need to do. Sophia and I will be here when you get back." Marco squeezed her hands, then stood. "Thank you," he said quietly. Then to his advisors, "Gentlemen, let's finalize the proposal." Emma left the study, her mind racing. She found Sophia still in the greenhouse, having finished planting all her seeds and now drawing pictures of what she hoped they'd grow into. "Is everything okay?" Sophia asked, looking up with those perceptive eyes. "Everything's fine," Emma assured her, sitting down beside the little girl. "Your papa has some important business to handle over the next couple of days. He'll be gone quite a bit, but you and I get to have extra time together. What should we do?" Sophia considered this. "Can we bake cookies and watch movies and maybe build a fort in the library?" "All of that sounds perfect," Emma said, pulling Sophia into a hug. "We're going to have the best 2 days ever." That evening, Marco left the estate in one of the SUVs, Giovanni in the front seat, 2 other security personnel following in a second vehicle. He'd said goodbye to Sophia with extra long hugs and kisses, promised he'd call before bedtime, and then pulled Emma aside for a private moment. "My phone will be on," he'd told her quietly. "If anything at all seems wrong, you call me immediately, and if I don't answer, you call Giovanni. The safe room is in the basement, behind the wine cellar. All the staff know the location. If there's any threat, you take Sophia there and you don't come out until I personally come to get you." "Marco, we'll be fine," Emma had said, though his intensity was making her increasingly nervous. He'd looked at her for a long moment and she'd seen something in his eyes beyond fear for his daughter. Something personal, something directed at her specifically. "Be safe, Emma. Both of you. Please." Then he'd left, and Emma had felt the absence of his presence like a physical weight. The first evening passed peacefully. Emma and Sophia baked chocolate chip cookies, making an enormous mess in the kitchen that Mrs. Chen good-naturedly helped clean up. They watched an animated movie, built an elaborate fort in the library using couch cushions and blankets, and had a tea party with Sophia's stuffed animals. When bedtime came, Sophia was reluctant to go to sleep. "I don't like when Papa's not here," she admitted quietly as Emma tucked her in. "I know, sweetheart," Emma said, brushing hair from Sophia's forehead, "but he'll call in just a few minutes to say goodnight, and I'm right down the hall if you need anything." "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" Sophia asked. "Of course." Emma sat in the chair beside Sophia's bed, holding the little girl's hand. True to his word, Marco called at 8:30. Emma handed the phone to Sophia, who chatted with her father about cookies and movies and all the fun they'd had. When she hung up, she seemed more settled. "Papa says he loves me to the moon and back," Sophia reported, snuggling into her pillows. "That's what Mama used to say too." "That's because it's true," Emma said softly. "You're very loved, Sophia." Within 20 minutes, Sophia was asleep. Emma stayed a few minutes longer, just watching the child's peaceful face, feeling the weight of the responsibility Marco had placed in her. Then she quietly left, leaving the door cracked open so she'd hear if Sophia called. The house felt different with Marco gone, quieter, emptier, despite the staff moving through their evening routines. Emma walked the halls too restless to sleep and found herself in Marco's study. She shouldn't be in here probably, but she couldn't help herself. The room smelled like him. Expensive cologne, leather, and something uniquely Marco. Emma sat in his chair behind the desk, running her fingers along the wood surface, and tried not to think about how much he'd come to care for this man in such a short time. It was more than attraction, more than gratitude for the opportunity he'd given her. It was genuine affection, respect, and something deeper that Emma was afraid to name. She thought about his hands holding hers earlier, about the way he looked at her sometimes when Sophia wasn't watching, about the late-night conversations where they'd shared pieces of their pasts and their hopes for the future. This was dangerous territory. He was her employer, Sophia's father, a man whose world was so far from anything she'd known. Getting emotionally involved would complicate everything. But maybe it was already too late for warnings. Maybe her heart had made its decision weeks ago, that first night when he'd invited a lonely stranger into his home. Emma's phone buzzed with a text. "Marco, everything quiet there?" She smiled and typed back, "Completely quiet. Sophia's asleep. We had a good day." His response came quickly. "Thank you for being there. It helps me focus knowing she's with you." Emma stared at the message, reading between the lines. She typed, "How are the negotiations going? Complicated, but progress is being made. I should be home tomorrow evening. We'll be waiting. Be safe. You too." Emma left the study and went to bed, but sleep was elusive. She tossed and turned, her mind full of worry for Marco, hyper-aware of every sound in the house. When she finally dozed off, it was past 2 in the morning. She woke to screaming. Emma bolted upright, her heart pounding, instantly alert. It was Sophia, crying out in fear or pain, Emma couldn't tell which. She ran from her room, nearly colliding with Mrs. Chen in the hallway, and burst into Sophia's room. The little girl was sitting up in bed, sobbing, clearly in the grip of a nightmare. Emma rushed to her, gathering her into her arms. "Shh, sweetheart, it's okay. It's just a bad dream. You're safe. I'm here." Sophia clung to her, her small body shaking. "There were bad men," she gasped between sobs. "They were taking Papa away. And you. And I was all alone again." Emma's heart broke. "Oh, Sophia, that's not going to happen. Your Papa is fine. I'm right here. Nobody's taking anyone away." Mrs. Chen appeared with a glass of water, her face concerned. Emma took it gratefully, helping Sophia take small sips until the crying subsided into hiccups. "I'm scared," Sophia whispered. "Something feels wrong. I can feel it." Children's intuition was remarkably accurate sometimes, and Sophia's words sent a chill through Emma. But she kept her voice calm and reassuring. "Tell you what, why don't you sleep in my room tonight? We can have a sleepover, just you and me. Would that help?" Sophia nodded, still clinging to Emma. Together they walked to Emma's room, Sophia carrying her favorite stuffed rabbit. Emma settled the little girl in her bed, then lay down beside her, keeping a protective arm around the child. "Tell me a story," Sophia requested quietly, "about when you were little." Emma searched her memory for something happy, something that wouldn't reveal too much about the loneliness of her childhood. "When I was about your age," she began, "I lived with a foster family that had a big dog named Charlie. He was a golden retriever, and he thought he was a lapdog even though he weighed almost as much as I did." She continued the story, making up details, describing adventures with Charlie that may or may not have happened exactly as she told them. Sophia's breathing gradually evened out, and soon she was asleep again, her hand still gripping Emma's shirt. Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Sophia's warm weight against her side. She thought about Marco somewhere in the city, negotiating with people who'd threatened his family. She thought about the life she'd stumbled into, about how much these people had come to mean to her, and she prayed that Sophia's nightmare was just a nightmare, nothing more. Morning came gray and cold. Emma woke to find Sophia already awake, watching her with solemn eyes. "Morning, sweetheart," Emma said, stretching carefully. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Sophia said. "Sorry I woke you up." "Don't ever apologize for needing me," Emma said firmly. "That's what I'm here for. Now what should we do today?" They went downstairs for breakfast, where Mrs. Chen had prepared Sophia's favorite, pancakes with fresh berries. The day passed slowly. Emma kept Sophia occupied with activities, more baking, art projects, reading stories. But there was a tension in the air that even Sophia's cheerful determination couldn't completely dispel. Marco called twice, brief conversations that confirmed negotiations were ongoing. He sounded tired but hopeful. "Tomorrow," he told Emma during the second call, "we should have an agreement finalized by tomorrow afternoon. We'll be here," Emma promised. That evening, after Sophia was in bed, in her own room this time, the nightmare seemingly forgotten in daylight, Emma sat in the living room with Mrs. Chen, who'd brought her tea. "You've been good for them," the housekeeper said unexpectedly. "Mr. Valentino and Miss Sophia. I've been with this family for 15 years, since before Sophia was born. I've watched Mr. Valentino carry grief and responsibility that would crush most men. You've brought light back into this house." Emma felt her throat tighten. "I'm just doing my job." Mrs. Chen smiled knowingly. "If you think this is just a job anymore, Miss Martinez, you're not paying attention. That man looks at you the way he used to look at Isabella, like you're something precious, something worth protecting." Emma didn't know what to say to that. Before she could formulate a response, Giovanni appeared in the doorway, his phone in his hand, his expression grim. "Miss Martinez, Mr. Valentino needs to speak with you. It's urgent." Emma's heart dropped. She took the phone Giovanni extended, her hand shaking slightly. "Marco?" "Emma, listen carefully." His voice was tight, controlled, but she could hear the stress underneath. "The negotiations have hit a complication. The Carusos are demanding a face-to-face meeting with me alone, at a location of their choosing. My advisors think it might be a setup, a way to put pressure on me by making me feel vulnerable." "Don't go," Emma said immediately. "If it's not safe, I have to," Marco interrupted. "If I refuse, we're back to square one and the tensions will only escalate. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to take Sophia and go to the safe room. Now, stay there with Giovanni's team until I personally come to get you." "Marco, you're scaring me," Emma said, fear creeping into her voice. I'm being cautious, he replied, probably overly cautious. But I'd rather have you safe and have it be unnecessary than take any chances. Please, Emma, do this for me. Okay, Emma said, making her decision. Okay, I'll get Sophia. We'll go to the safe room. Thank you. I'll call you as soon as the meeting is over. It shouldn't take more than 2 hours. Emma, he paused and she heard him take a breath. Thank you. For everything. For being who you are. The line went dead before she could respond. Emma handed the phone back to Giovanni. We need to get Sophia to the safe room. The bodyguard nodded approvingly. I'll alert the team. Mrs. Chen will show you the way. Move quickly, but don't alarm the child if possible. Emma ran upstairs, her mind racing. She opened Sophia's door as quietly as possible, but the little girl stirred immediately. Emma? Sophia's sleepy voice called out. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, sweetheart, Emma said, turning on the bedside lamp. But we're going to play a game. Your papa wants us to practice using the safe room just in case we ever need it. Like a fire drill, remember? Sophia sat up, rubbing her eyes. She was smart enough to sense something was off, but trusting enough not to panic. Okay. Should I bring Mr. Rabbit? Yes, and let's get your slippers on. Within 3 minutes, they were heading downstairs. Mrs. Chen met them at the basement door, and Giovanni appeared with 2 other security personnel. One of them carried what looked like communication equipment. The other was clearly armed, though he kept his weapon discreetly positioned. The basement was finished and surprisingly comfortable, with storage rooms and a small wine cellar. Mrs. Chen led them through the wine cellar to what looked like a solid wall of brick. She pressed a specific sequence on what appeared to be decorative stonework, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a hidden room. The safe room was about 15 feet square, with reinforced walls, its own air filtration system, and enough supplies to last several days. There were beds, a small bathroom, communication equipment, and even some toys and books that someone had thoughtfully stocked for Sophia's sake. This is cool, Sophia said, looking around with interest. It's like a secret hideout. Exactly, Emma agreed, trying to keep her voice light. A secret hideout where we can be very safe. Mrs. Chen and one of the security personnel entered with them. Giovanni stayed outside. I'll be right here, he said. The door locks from the inside. Don't open it for anyone except me or Mr. Valentino. Anyone else tries to get in, you use the phone in there to call the police directly. The door closed with a heavy final sound and Emma heard the locks engage. Sophia immediately went to explore, checking out the supplies, the bathroom, the small kitchenette. She seemed to think this was an adventure, and Emma was grateful for the child's resilience. Mrs. Chen settled into a chair, her face calm, but serious. We wait, she said simply. The security guard, Emma learned his name was Robert, positioned himself by the door, monitoring communication equipment. Emma sat on one of the beds and Sophia climbed up beside her. Is Papa okay? The little girl asked quietly. Your papa is fine, Emma assured her. He just wants to make sure we're extra safe while he finishes his business. He'll come get us as soon as he's done. Sophia nodded, accepting this, and asked Emma to read to her. Emma found a book among the supplies and began reading, her voice steady, even though her heart was racing. An hour passed, then another. Sophia eventually fell asleep against Emma's shoulder, exhausted by the late hour. Mrs. Chen dozed in her chair. Robert remained alert, occasionally speaking quietly into his radio. Emma couldn't sleep. She kept checking her phone, but there were no new messages. She thought about Marco walking into a meeting with potential enemies, without Giovanni, without his usual protection. She thought about all the things she'd never said to him, about feelings she'd been too cautious to acknowledge. At 11:47 p.m., Robert's radio crackled. Emma's head snapped up. She heard Giovanni's voice, though she couldn't make out the words. Robert responded, then turned to them. It's done, he said. Mr. Valentino is en route. ETA 20 minutes, all clear. Emma felt her entire body sag with relief. Thank God, she whispered. Mrs. Chen woke, smiled, and patted Emma's hand. I told you Mr. Valentino knows how to handle himself. They waited those 20 minutes in tense anticipation. Then they heard it. The sound of the locks disengaging. The door opened, and Marco stood there, Giovanni behind him. Marco looked exhausted. His tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, but he was whole and safe. His eyes found Emma immediately, and the relief in his expression mirrored what she felt. Then he looked at his sleeping daughter, and something in his face softened completely. It's over, he said quietly. We have an agreement. The Carusos have accepted our terms. It's done. Emma carefully shifted Sophia in her arms, and Marco crossed the room in 3 strides. He lifted his daughter gently and Sophia stirred, blinking sleepily. "Papa?" she murmured. "I'm here, Piccola," he said softly. "Everything's okay. Let's go back to bed." They made their way upstairs, Marco carrying Sophia, Emma following close behind. He took Sophia to her room and laid her in bed, pulling the covers up and kissing her forehead. Sophia was asleep again before he even left the room. In the hallway, Marco turned to Emma. They stood there in the dim light, and Emma saw the toll the past 2 days had taken on him. The stress, the fear, the weight of every decision. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Instead of answering, Marco pulled her into his arms. Emma froze for just a second, surprised, then wrapped her arms around him, holding him tightly. She could feel his heart beating against her chest, could feel the tension slowly draining from his body. "I was terrified," he admitted, his voice rough. "Not for myself, but for Sophia. And for you. The thought of anything happening to either of you." "We're safe," Emma whispered. "We're both safe. You kept us safe." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, and Emma felt something shift between them. This wasn't employer and employee anymore. This was something deeper, something real and undeniable. When Marco finally pulled back, his hands remained on her shoulders. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Emma, he started, then seemed to struggle with what to say. "These past weeks, having you here, watching you with Sophia, talking with you, you've become important to me. More important than I expected. More important than is probably wise." Emma's heart raced. "Marco, I know this complicates things," he continued. "I know I'm your employer, that there are power dynamics and considerations, but I can't pretend anymore that I don't feel something for you. Something beyond gratitude or professional respect." Emma took a shaky breath. "I feel it too," she admitted. "I've been trying not to, trying to keep things professional, but I can't help it. Being here, being part of your lives, it's changed me. You've changed me." Marco's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek. "I don't want to rush you or pressure you, but I need you to know. You belong here. Not as an employee, not as Sophia's companion, but as part of our family. If you want that, if you're willing to take that risk with us." Tears filled Emma's eyes. "I want that," she whispered, "more than I've ever wanted anything." Marco smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Emma didn't want to pull away. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Marco rested his forehead against hers. "Sophia's birthday is in 2 weeks," he said. "I'd like you to help me plan it. Not as her companion, but as family." "I'd love that," Emma said, smiling through her tears. 2 weeks later, Sophia's birthday party was in full swing. The house had been transformed with decorations, balloons, streamers, and a banner proclaiming, "Happy 7th birthday, Sophia." Children from her class ran through the rooms under the watchful eyes of their parents and the ever-vigilant Giovanni. Emma stood in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen, preparing to bring out the elaborate princess cake they'd spent 2 days creating. She wore a blue dress Marco had insisted on buying her. "You're part of the family now," he'd said. "Let me do this." She watched through the doorway as Marco played with the children, his serious demeanor completely abandoned as he pretended to be a dragon being defeated by brave knights. Sophia's laughter rang out, pure and joyful, and Emma's heart felt so full it might burst. "He's going to propose, you know," Mrs. Chen said quietly beside her. Emma's eyes widened. "What? We've only been—" "Not marriage," Mrs. Chen clarified with a knowing smile. "Not yet, anyway. But he's going to ask you to stay permanently, to make this official. He told me yesterday he's having papers drawn up for a formal position. Sophia's guardian, essentially. Equal say in decisions about her welfare, education, everything." Emma felt overwhelmed. That's huge. That's legally binding. That's Marco telling you he trusts you with the most important thing in his life," Mrs. Chen corrected. "And if I'm reading the signs correctly, it's also the first step toward something more permanent between you two. He's a traditional man, Emma. He won't rush into marriage, especially with Sophia to consider, but he's laying the groundwork." Emma watched Marco lift Sophia onto his shoulders so she could see over the other children, watched the way his face glowed with love for his daughter, and thought about how her life had led her to this moment. From foster care to loneliness, to a chance encounter on Christmas Eve, to this, a family, a home, a place where she belonged. It seemed impossible, like something from a fairy tale, but it was real. She could hear Sophia calling her name, could see Marco looking for her in the crowd, could feel the warmth and love that filled this house. "Let's bring out the cake," Emma said, smiling. "It's time to celebrate." The party was a magnificent success. Sophia declared it the best birthday ever, and her friends left with goodie bags and stories about the amazing estate where Sophia Valentino lived. After the last guest departed and Sophia had finally been convinced to go to bed, exhausted but happy, Marco found Emma on the terrace overlooking the gardens. The evening was cold but clear, stars visible in the dark sky. "Thank you," he said, coming to stand beside her, "for everything you did today." Sophia was radiant. "She deserves to be," Emma replied. "She's an amazing little girl." "She is, and much of that is because of you." Marco turned to face her fully. "Emma, these past months have shown me something I'd stopped believing was possible, that life can be full again, that joy doesn't have to be shadowed by fear or grief, that family can grow in unexpected ways." Emma's heart began to race. Was this the conversation Mrs. Chen had predicted? "I spoke with my lawyers yesterday," Marco continued. "I've had papers drawn up that would make you Sophia's legal guardian, sharing that role with me. It would give you legal standing to make decisions about her welfare, to speak for her if anything ever happened to me. It's a serious commitment, legally binding, and I wouldn't ask if I wasn't absolutely certain." "Marco," Emma breathed, overwhelmed. "I know it's fast," he said quickly. "We can wait if you need time. But Emma, you're already her guardian in every way that matters. You love her like she's your own. She loves you like a mother. I want to make that official, to give you the security and authority that role deserves." Emma felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course, yes. I would be honored. I love Sophia more than I knew it was possible to love anyone." Marco smiled, relieved and happy. "There's something else," he said, reaching out to take her hands. "This isn't just about Sophia, and I think you know that. What I feel for you, Emma, I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I've already fallen. I don't want to rush you or pressure you into anything, but I need you to know that when I envision my future, you're in it, not as an employee, or even just as Sophia's guardian, but as my partner, as the woman I want by my side." Emma couldn't speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Instead, she reached up and pulled him down into a kiss, deeper and more passionate than their first, full of promise and possibility, and the kind of love that changes everything. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Marco rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" he asked with a small laugh. "That's a yes to everything," Emma whispered. "To being Sophia's guardian, to building a future together, to taking this chance on something amazing. I'm falling in love with you too, Marco. With you and Sophia and this life we're creating." They stood there under the stars, holding each other, and Emma marveled at how far she'd come from that lonely Christmas Eve. She thought about the empty restaurant, the endless sadness, the conviction that she'd always be alone, and then she thought about a 6-year-old girl with kind eyes who'd simply said, "Come home with me," and changed everything. 1 year later, Emma stood in the kitchen of Rossini's Italian restaurant, watching through the window as the dinner service wound down. It was Christmas Eve again, exactly 1 year since that fateful night, and Marco had suggested they come here to celebrate, a full circle, a way of honoring where their story began. Mr. Rossini had closed the restaurant to regular customers for the evening, and instead hosted a private dinner for the Valentino family. Sophia, now 8 and even more confident than before, sat at a table with her grandmother, Marco's mother, who'd flown in from Italy for the holidays, and who'd welcomed Emma with open arms and tears of joy. Marco came up behind Emma, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "About last year," Emma admitted. "About how lonely I was. About how I thought I'd spend every Christmas Eve for the rest of my life cleaning tables and going home to an empty apartment. And now?" Marco prompted. Emma turned in his arms, looking up at the man she loved. "Now I have everything I never knew I needed. A daughter who calls me Mama. A man who loves me for exactly who I am. A family that chose me even though they didn't have to." Marco smiled and kissed her forehead. Then, to Emma's shock, he dropped to one knee right there in the restaurant kitchen, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Emma Martinez," he said, his voice thick with emotion. You walked into my life on the loneliest night, and you brought light and laughter and love. You've become the mother Sophia needed, the partner I'd stopped believing I'd ever find again. Would you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife? Emma's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Through the window she could see Sophia watching with wide, hopeful eyes, bouncing in her seat with barely contained excitement. Yes, Emma said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes. Marco slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple but beautiful solitaire, and stood to kiss her. Through the window they heard Sophia shriek with joy and start clapping, and Marco's mother was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. They went back out to the dining room where Sophia immediately launched herself at Emma. You're really going to be my mama? She asked, as if needing confirmation. Forever and ever? Forever and ever, Emma promised, hugging the little girl tightly. Nothing will ever change that. Mr. Rossini brought out champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Sophia, raising his glass in a toast. To family, he said, his eyes twinkling. However we find it, wherever it comes from. To the love that brings us together and the courage to embrace it. To family, they echoed, glasses clinking in the small restaurant where it had all begun. Later that night, after they'd returned to the estate and Sophia had finally been convinced to go to bed, though only after making Emma promise 3 times that she'd still be there in the morning, Emma and Marco sat in the library, the fire crackling, their futures spread out before them like an unwritten book. I never thought I'd marry again, Marco admitted quietly. After Isabella died, I thought that chapter of my life was over. I thought I'd focus on Sophia and the business, and that would be enough. And now? Emma asked, snuggled against his side. Now I know that the heart has infinite capacity for love, Marco said. Isabella will always be part of my story, part of Sophia's story. But you, Emma, you're my future. You're proof that life can surprise us, that second chances are real, that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. Emma thought about that first night, about Sophia's simple invitation, about the risk she'd taken in saying yes. Do you think Sophia knew, she asked, that bringing me home would lead to all this? Marco laughed softly. Knowing my daughter, probably. She has always had an uncanny ability to know what people need before they know it themselves. She needed a mother, I needed a partner, and you needed a family. Sophia just put all the pieces together. She's remarkable, Emma said. She is, and she's lucky to have you. Marco pulled Emma closer. We both are. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire, and Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her here. All the lonely years, all the foster homes, all the times she'd felt invisible and unimportant. They'd led her to this moment, to this man, to this child, to this life that felt almost too good to be true. But it was true. It was real. And tomorrow morning, Sophia would wake up and run to Emma's room, soon to be Emma and Marco's room, and Emma would be there, just as she'd promised, just as she always would be. Because Emma had finally found what she'd been searching for her entire life, a place to belong, people to love, and the certainty that she was chosen, wanted, and home. She'd spent Christmas Eve alone cleaning tables, until a little girl with a kind heart had said 5 simple words that changed everything. Come home with me. And Emma had. And in doing so, she'd discovered that sometimes family isn't about blood or biology. Sometimes it's about finding your people in the most unexpected places, and having the courage to say yes when they invite you.